there's been good confirmation that this zone has continuity and continues to have high grade.
I think just as a practical point of view, as when we made the discovery at Lion, it broke the rules of what was known of the area beforehand. It changed the geological maps of Quebec, what we did. I say to people when I talk about the project, I say it's a lot like playing poker. You've got your hole cards, and then they do the flop, and then you got your three, and then the next card comes in. Each card changes your running odds of winning the hand and how you might play the hand.
All I can say is that we have a wonderful group of qualified people to carry this program out. Yeah, there's some sleepless nights, but generally I feel very comfortable that we're going to successfully explore these targets.
Today I'm joined once again with the Power Metallic team to gain further context regarding the latest release and how they affect their overall story and trajectory on the company. Now, this is a recording, which is not our typical style, but don't worry, we scoured the web for all the questions you may have, and following the update, we will be addressing them all. But first, I'll pass things over to Terry to get his commentary on today's news.
Great, Kyle. Thanks. Good to be here. And obviously recorded and not live. Steve's actually having a procedure tomorrow, and we couldn't accommodate him live. He wouldn't look as beautiful as he does now, and he doesn't want to do that. He's got this movie star image that he has to protect. Just teasing you, Steve. But so that's why we're not live. But we wanted to cover the press release, talk about our land acquisition strategy this summer, and why we did that, and then also delve into the fall winter exploration program, which we're so excited about. Without further ado, let's start to talk about the release itself. So another 2 super high grade holes in the Lion zone that were impactful and are growing the resource, and then some good smoke out on the in the Lion Tiger area that we've used to identify some pretty exciting next steps for us when we followed it up with the borehole EM. But I'm going to toss this right over to Joe, who can walk us a bit more through in the detail of the release and where these holes are and what they mean, and then also discuss the implications on the Lion Tiger drilling we did there and what's that setting up for us. Joe, I'm going to fire that to you for now.
Okay, and a lot of questions have been asked recently about why we haven't been reporting a lot of extensional drilling, and we have had some technical problems in our drill program to complete some holes. So there's a couple of holes that will be mentioned in this news release, hole 19 and 24A specifically. And both of those holes were being drilled as extensional holes, but had to be abandoned because of ground conditions. And we've spent the last 3 to 4 weeks in improving the equipment that we have on site so that we can complete these holes. From an extensional point of view, the only hole that we've got in so far is hole 17. And it had a reasonable intersection of 7 meters at a 1.41 copper equivalent. It's not in the heart of the zone that we've been trying to target, and those holes will be coming over the next few weeks. From the mineral resource estimation point of view, again, we're trying to drill off the deposit to about 50-meter centers. That program has been quite successful, particularly because the holes are somewhat shallower than the deep extension holes we're trying to drill. So we've been able to complete those holes effectively. And as Terry mentioned, some of these results are quite good. Hole 22, as an example, which was down plunge from the main chute area, it was designed to cover in an area that is poorly drilled. And so on the drawing here, you can see that hole 22 is smack in the middle. And we ended up hitting 6.85 meters of 13% copper equivalent in that hole, including, and that's at a recovered grade of 80%. The actual in situ copper value in there was 9.39% copper with about 10 grams of platinum palladium and 2 grams of gold in that zone. And about 75 meters away from that hole, we drilled hole 23. It had a total zone of 27.5 meters of 2.75% copper equivalent, but within that was a 5.9 meter intersection of 7.28 copper or 10.4 copper equivalent recovered. So those are obviously good highlight holes showing that the zone has some good consistency. As we've mentioned before, this is a high grade zone. It acts like a lode. So we expect to see a high variability in these holes, but so far our infill drilling has confirmed the shoot orientations that we've interpreted. There's been good confirmation that this zone has continuity and continues to have high grade. And as the assay results come in, we're going to have some more extensional holes to report as we move forward. And of course, there'll be more infill drilling. That program will continue through the winter to solidify the model of Lion for a resource estimate sometime in the future. From the perspective of what are we doing on the exploration side, we put in 3 holes that were below previous drilling between Lion and Tiger. So on this long section, you can see the Lion zone with the multiple drill holes into it. And then up in the upper right-hand corner is the drilling that we did around the Tiger deposit. And we have now reinterpreted Tiger as a xenolith or blocks of mineralization that have been thrust up from a deeper target. So these are actually rafted blocks that have come up in an intrusion. And so obviously we want to find the source of those rafted blocks. So we drilled 3 holes between Tiger and Lion and did borehole EM on them. 2 very important things have come out of that program. One is off of hole 30, we did the borehole and came up with a large M conductor below and to the east of hole 30. And we are currently drilling that borehole anomaly now. This anomaly has the hallmarks of a large conductor. You get a different profile of your anomaly when the conductor is a big one. And so we believe that it's pointing us in the direction that we would expect to find this deposit. And I can talk a little bit later on why we believe that when we talk about the fold that we're targeting now. In addition, in hole 21, we actually hit some Lion-style mineralization in that hole. It was a fairly modest intersection of 1.48% copper equivalent over 3.7 meters. The important things about that intersection was it was on the target horizon that we expect to see Lion on, with the appropriate rock types that identify the Lion. And when we did the borehole EM, we picked up a borehole conductor off hole that is leading us to suspect that there's either an offshoot from Lion or a second shoot that is starting to build in this area. So again, very important moving forward with the exploration play in the Lion and Tiger area. And as I mentioned earlier, we can show some graphics that explain why that area is gaining in importance for us. So
okay. That's terrific, Joe. And we'll get into a bit more of the exploration next steps in just a moment. The release is broken down into 3 parts. Obviously, the existing assays that we reported today, the land acquisition program, and then some discussion of the future drilling programs. Just wanted to review the land acquisition program. Maybe I think we can put up that other graphic. For us, I think just as a practical point of view, as when we made the discovery at Lion, it broke the rules of what was known of the area beforehand. It changed the geological maps of Quebec, what we did. And so when you make a discovery like that, for a moment in time, you have the recipe of what geologically worked, what geophysically worked, what geochemically worked. And that's a recipe that you have and nobody else has at that moment in time. So when we looked at it and then we looked at the broader regional package, we realized most likely this is going to become a district, where this will obviously, as we move Lion and Nis towards becoming a mine, we think that this will not be the only one of this sort in this area, that there's probably going to be multiple mines discovered in this district over time. And so what we felt was important for us as a company was to get as much of the land that had the recipe that we used for successfully as we could. So we went at it, and there were three parts to the strategy. Obviously, we made the first deal with Lyft back in the summer in July. That's the land in purple there that you see on your screen. So that was the Lyft package that was both south and a little bit west of our current land package. And then there was a nub to the right there where you can see where there's a circle in the screen where that the circle is part two, which was what we call the hydrolands. And the hydrolands were important because, generally speaking, it's immediately adjacent to land discovery. And our feeling right from the get-go was we needed to get access to that land. And we've been working on getting that land for over a year now. We went to our partners at GSP and asked them for help in going to Hydro-Quebec and getting them to remove this restriction that had been there from a long time back in the past and no longer valid from the hydro perspective. But we felt that with the support of the James Bay Cree, we could get Hydro to ultimately remove the restriction and give us back some land that would automatically become ours, and then open up for staking other land that we ultimately did stake. So that's what happened. And what's on the screen in front of you is land that we reclaimed plus land that we staked. And this land was really critical because Joe will get into in a little bit. He's going to start to talk to you about the what we call the fold hinge possibilities out there on the line in the hydro ground. And that was something we saw as an essential part of our exploration efforts, was to tie that up. So that was part two. And part three was the basin lands that we've added just by staking, because ultimately, that's possible as we go forward in the future. These will be additionally prospective areas to look at. We're really pleased with our summer program. And I just want to throw it over to Steve and Joe, just get a little comment on the regional play and why we did what we did. Steve, maybe you want to give us your thoughts?
Yeah, Terry. So the most important thing, as Terry's already alluded to, is the camp scale nature or the clustered nature of things. And we've been very clear from the beginning that we consider that Nisk and Lion are either connected or part of the same camp or district, if you like, and that because the system is very strongly remobilized, something akin to Thompson or Sleepy Piqui, then there'll be a large strike extent, and it's about piecing together the pieces of that package that we can identify already in the larger scale structure. So maybe, Joe, do you want to show the architecture?
Yeah, if I can just talk to this screen first, is there's purple geology shown on here, and that basically outlines the basin edges. And it's not that within the basin there isn't a possibility of deposits, but certainly the low-hanging fruit is going to be along the basin edges, which we can get to fairly quickly. And just to illustrate that, I'm going to slide on to another image here. It illustrates both the importance of getting the hydro ground and the strategy that we're moving forward in terms of exploration for what has been coined as the big one. As Steve pointed out, we recognize that Lion is a mobilized part of the system, and to some extent so is Nisk, even though it resides in the ultramafics. And so we know that these deposits have come from somewhere, and where you want to look for them is in structures that could possibly thicken the deposits and give you more sort of bang for your buck in a broader, smaller volume. And where you look for those is in a prospective fold hinge. So we already know this area is pregnant. It's already has great mineralization associated with it. And early on, we identified a fold axis that looked like the type of target we wanted to explore for. But up until the time we gathered in the hydro ground, we didn't control all of that fold hinge. And I was very adamant to Power Metallic that we needed to get that ground, and it was restricting our ability to explore effectively until that ground came in. So it was a real coup to get that ground opened up and to acquire it. And you can see on this drawing, there's a red dashed line down the middle of what we're calling the fold hinge. You can see the magnetics that sort of swing around from the Lion side to the south limb of that fold. That's a primary target for us. And to just allude back to particularly hole 30, where I showed a borehole EM conductor, that conductor is moving itself towards this fold hinge. So now we have a conductor that is supporting the idea that there is a potential mass of sulfides at the bottom of this fold. And to look at this fold in a different dimension, if we look at it in cross section on this slide, and again, this is rather cartoony, but it delivers the message. You can see that we have an interpreted fold here that has the ultramafics on either side of it. Our target is in the hinge, where we expect there might be some thickening. Also illustrated on this cross section is a deep hole we drilled over a year ago, hole 64. It was the longest hole we had put in. And again, at the time we put it in, it was basically just a look-see. Let's just let this hole run for a while and see what's at the end of it. And we didn't see geology that was particularly indicative of proximity to a deposit, but when we did the borehole EM, we ended up getting an indication again of a very large anomaly. And this anomaly would be distal in terms of hundreds of meters, but proximity to the same anomaly that we're seeing in hole 30. It could possibly be from the same mineralized structure. So potentially quite large. And so what we're doing at the present is, and it took a little bit of work because we had to build some drill roads to get into the target area, but we're in the process of deepening that hole 64 to give us a better look at the anomaly and get a direction for where the plate is that hole is picking up. And again, similar to hole 30, it's a broad anomaly indicative of something quite large. So pretty exciting to be moving ahead with this. And once we can nail down the orientation of the plate, you can be assured that we'll be starting to poke holes into it.
Steve, any thoughts on that in terms of you've studied these types of structures all over the world? Is this reminiscent of anything for you? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, one of the things you can really clearly see about the geology of Lion is that we're on the limb of a structure. So it's a highly attenuated, remobilized limb. So that's the, if you like, the skinny part of the ore system. We've known that since day one. To really turn these into super thick systems, you've got to go for the fold hinge, like Joe says. So we've had this mantra since the beginning that we're looking for fold hinges. The local little thickenings in Lion, they are little parasitic structures. So we know we're looking for something more substantive. By way of analogy, the Thompson nickel belt, the Thompson deposit's hosted in the fold hinge. That's what makes these things giant ore bodies. It's all about finding the folds.
Yeah, that's become the go-to, find the fold hinge. We joke about that internally, as that's the mantra. Every day we wake up trying to find the fold hinge. So I think what's exciting in what we've said to the public, when we're talking about our summer program and about our winter program, is that the summer program was designed largely to get the land packages we needed. And we avoided our sort of primary targets, some of which we already had, but it would have been just right on the border. So if you were successful, we'd have to disclose it, and then it certainly would have driven up pricing. So we targeted areas that we still wanted to explore and still have looked to grown, and we have grown the resource over the summer. But I would call the AAA targets, Tiger Deep, this extension of 64, and obviously the Hydroland fold areas were left untouched, but are now obviously the core focus of follow-up in a winter program. So probably a good segue to, just for a moment before we go to questions, is to talk about the fall and winter exploration program, Joe, and what our priorities are and what questions we're hoping to answer.
Okay, obviously, with the discussion we just had, we're going to be putting a lot of focus into this area here. And although we've presented it as a target, it's a large area. And so there's a potential that there would be multiple lodes or deposits sitting in this target, and we'll be exploring that through the winter. Logistically, so people understand, we do drill throughout the year, but we do have limitations in the summertime because this area has a lot of lakes and streams and muskeg. So winter is our time to really get busy. Everything freezes up. We can move drills around a lot easier. So targets that we have not been able to get to in the fall and the summer, we'll be getting to this winter. In addition to this area, we have two anomalies, one to the west and one to the east of Lion Tiger. And both of those anomaly areas are going to be drilled soon. Again, we're moving up to 5 drills later this week. So we'll have 5 machines running to test these other targets. In addition to that area, the 5 kilometers between Nisk and Lion is now open to us. It would be important to note that even though we held the trend between Nisk and Lion, it was very close to the previous property boundary. And I had recommended strongly not to go into those areas and drill them, and now they're open for us. So we got 5 kilometers of strike length there that we have to explore. And as I mentioned earlier, there's actually a pretty decent anomaly to the west of Lion that we want to go after. In addition to that, we're investigating we did a lot of geological mapping. We did an airborne EM survey that came up with literally hundreds of EM conductors. So now the hard work of trying to prioritize those to decide which ones we should go after. Another important layer of information we have is gravity. We have to start integrating that into our programs because we know that the sulfide deposits and the ultramafics for that matter, will have some dense characteristics that we can map out and add into our EM anomalies from the airborne. And on top of that, we have some fairly comprehensive soil geochemistry that was done by LIFT actually and outlined some interesting anomalies in this regional trend that Terry mentioned as a district play. And one of those is to the west of Nisk that we want to try to get onto as soon as we can integrate all the information that is there. And that has quite a nice copper anomaly associated with it in the soils. So that'll be another primary target for us. And then just to touch on how are we filtering through all of these anomalies from the airborne, we're creating a matrix that will have 2 parts to it. One will be a Lion style matrix for prioritizing targets because it has a different EM signature than NIST does. And then we'll make a matrix up for NIST style deposits also. And then we'll be armored up for moving forward with good priority targets as we continue to do our exploration drilling.
I say to people when I talk about the project, I say it's a lot like playing poker. You've got your whole cards, and then they do the flop, and then you got your 3, and then the next card comes, and each card changes your running odds of winning the hand and how you might play the hand. And it's clearly, obviously, for us, just like what we had with the Lion, when we had the initial drill hole that was successful, and then it was 1 hole, and who knew? And then we obviously threw 16 holes down in 4 months, and 15 of the 16 hit, and we blew the thing up. As we're drilling like Tiger Deep, if we hit what we're looking for, a massive sulfide rich area, then we'll pepper it like we did Lion. We'll look to focus on growing a resource there or a mineralized area because there's no 43-101. But so it's somewhat your exploration plans are you have a design and then you drill and God tells you what you got. If you're fortunate enough, like we have been with Lion, to hit the prize, and obviously we'll focus on expanding the prize, and that's obviously what we're trying to do. And the same thing with the deeper hole, and ultimately finding that. The good news from as an asymmetric investor, which is what I consider myself, is that we've got a lot of great data. Our technology has been working. The borehole EM has been very good for us. We're looking at doing some new things like Muon and stuff like that, which we'll talk about more in the future as we explore these things. But so that data collection has been good. We've been piecing together a lot of the great data. We've got a great scientific team led by Joe and Steve that have pieced it together to give us our best targets. and now we're testing. And it's exploration. We're going to miss more often than we're going to hit, but we're going to get some hits here, I believe. And we alluded in the press release that the best is yet to come, and I really truly believe that, and I think the team does. But it's exploration, and we got to get out there and do it. So before we go to questions, I just want to go back to Steve and Joe and just get their final thoughts on the Fallen Winter program and what their perspective is. Steve, maybe over to you.
Yeah, obviously there's a couple of things there that we're very excited about. Anytime you get close to a fold hinge, it's a big deal. So the anomaly on the end of 64, we'll be watching that one with close intent. And we always knew that Tiger has more of a nickel flavor to it. And I've never been convinced that Tiger was it. It's got to be something more substantive than that. Looking forward to Tiger Deeps for sure.
Joe, how about you?
Yeah, and on top of what I agree completely with what Steve said, because of my role in the exploration, my first thoughts are logistics. How do we make this happen? How do we get the people in place, both technical and drillers, to complete this program? All I can say is that we have a wonderful group of qualified people to carry this program out. Yeah, there's some sleepless nights, but generally I feel very comfortable that we're going to successfully explore these targets.
All right. Listen, guys, that was great. And it was funny when we were up there on Monday this past week, we had a group of investors in and we brought them up and showed them the Lion. I think that was the one comment that I got back from the investors was that how impressed they were with the knowledge of the team, the detail to which that they had put their work together. They knew what they were talking about in terms of the strategy here. And I think that's what gives me a lot of comfort at night when I'm out there representing the company to investors, is that I feel like we're very well funded. We've got lots of cash. We're executing a well thought out program. And we're in a very rich mineralized area. And we've had some great success, and we believe even greater successes in our future, but we obviously have to go out there and do it. But we've got the team, the time, and the money to get it done. And we're in the meat of the season now, and we're pretty stoked. Maybe, Kyle, now would be a good time to answer some of the questions you were able to.
Yeah, so the Power Metallic team is definitely stoked about what you're doing here, but what do you believe the market is currently misunderstanding or undervaluing about the company?
You know what? It's always a curiosity to me on the market. I think generally there may be a little frustration that the results have been slower. Like obviously when we hit Lion, when we hit the meat of the system, we had 15 of the 16 holes hit. And of course, a number of them were fabulous holes. So those things came out. And of course, as an exploration company, you'd like to be doing that all the time. Unfortunately, it's just awfully hard to do it. So it's not that we wouldn't have another sequence of series of Lion-like success. This is what we're going to get to. But you go through really super successful periods and then periods where you're still advancing the resource, but haven't necessarily hit the second prize. So I think people haven't, the reason why we're able to raise that money was that I think we showed the investors who actually wrote checks that we were very cheap relative to our peer group in terms of what we've already discovered. Forget what we might find. I think they've invested because they thought we were cheap, and they also invested because they thought we were going to find a lot more stuff. I think that still maintains and is true. Now, I think we've lost a little bit of the momentum, but in terms of having another string of hits. But I think what we're going to show with the obviously this current assay showed nice extensions in the MRE area of Lion, and then also gave us some good indicators of where maybe something special could be happening at Tiger Deep, which we're going to follow. So I think it's a question of patience and also getting to better markets. So we'll talk more about that as we go forward.
Do you anticipate moving toward production yourself, or is this long-term vision a sale, JV, partnership with a major mining company?
You know what? 19 times out of 20 juniors sell the deposit. That is obviously the typical way forward. This deposit will determine its own outcome, I suspect. Just how big it's going to be, how rich it's going to be. The one thing this deposit type has is it's extraordinarily high grade, and so it's going to present a very high IRR, which means funding it in production is going to be something that we could do. Obviously, that we're not a producer by design in terms of internal staffing and stuff like that, but there's methods and ways you could go with that. So I would say one thing's for sure: if we don't bring it to production, it's going to be because we're going to get paid like as if we're going to bring it to production. There's going to be a significant payout here, we believe. And if we have to put it in production, we certainly will. And this is not an unbelievable style to put in production. It's shallow, it's near surface, it's super high grade. It's going to pay for itself very quickly. It's not rocket science to build this thing. As I said, it'll really just depend on how big it's going to be. But I think we're going to keep all sort of possibilities on the table. And ultimately, we're always just looking to maximize shareholder value per unit of risk. And that'll be clear in our approach.
So how close is the company to demonstrating a resource that supports commercial scale, and what's left to prove?
I think you've got enough there to have a mine today. Obviously, we think we want to show more of it. These ore bodies historically have always, the orthomagmatic deposits that have been discovered have all ended up being more than 1 million tons of contained metal in the ground. We don't have our MREs on the nickel zone, nothing on the Lion yet, but with analysts' estimates, probably we're in the 5, 6, 7, 800,000 tons of contained metal in the ground now, depending on what analyst you're looking at, and we're still growing. So that, with this high grade, in my mind, makes this commercial today, but obviously be a smaller mine. What we're looking for is, can we make this a world-class mine? And that was really what we were given the $50 million to do, was to figure out how big is this thing going to be.
Great, thank you. How confident are you finding more high-grade shoots, and what composition do you expect them to be?
I'm going to throw that to Joe and Steve. Joe?
I think based on the deposit style that we're looking at, we're pretty confident there's more lions sitting out there. As Terry alluded to, though, it's complicated. It's going to take some time to make these discoveries. But in terms of exploration chance, this is about as good as it gets. We know the geology is right. We know the plumbing system has produced a deposit at Lion already. We have indications of other ones. So it's exploration, it's risk. But this is about as good as risk gets. And to take Terry's analogy, we've got a pretty good hand in front of us for this poker game.
And Stan,
Just one thing to add to that, Joe. We know from the nature of Lion that it's a zone system, zoned from its copper, PG, gold, silver system, and we know there's a nickel complement, and we know we've seen signs of that at Tiger, and we know the order of magnitude that this system has to be. That of course doesn't mean that we'll find it, but it does mean that the odds are good and the confidence is high.
Yeah.
And gentlemen, how deep do you expect Lion to be?
That's an interesting question. What we know right now, and it was illustrated on the cross section with the fold, we have 3D magnetic imaging that takes us down about 1.2 kilometers. I'm fairly comfortable in saying that the structure goes at least that deep. But given that this is a highly deformed terrain, the possibilities that these deformations through various parasitic folds, as Steve said, this basin could bottom out kilometers deep. And as I said earlier, we're trying for the low-hanging fruit right now. Let's shoot for the stuff that's close to surface, and we'll worry about the deep stuff in 30 or 40 years.
Well said, Joe. Well said.
Now, is there any risk that this is an overturned system, meaning there'll be no nickel below, rather that it eroded from the top?
I can talk to that. This was one of our early hypotheses. With these zone systems, they're zoned from nickel to copper. Some of them are zoned like Sudbury systems from nickel at the top to copper at the bottom. Some of them, like Oktyabrsky and Sakatti, are the other way around. We know from the metal zonation, from the detailed geochemistry, the system is zoned from copper at the top to nickel at the bottom. So that's the best possible scenario. The highest grade material is at the top, the earliest to be mined, and the commodity that perhaps is less favorable, nickel, is going to be deeper. The way this works in terms of metal tonnage is hard to put exact numbers on, but there should be more nickel than there is copper, and hopefully that's in good enough continuity to be economic. But in terms of the way you would want to design this, copper and PGs and gold and silver at the top and nickel at the bottom, that's what the chemistry tells us.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Are you close to sharing 3D modeling of the Lion Zone?
Basically, the images that we put up on the press releases are derived from a 3D model. So in-house, we have 3D models already, and that's how we target the deposit. And as a matter of fact, the maps and the cross sections that we've shown are derived from models. So the basis of starting to move towards an MRE are already there. But as Terry mentioned earlier, we are still waiting to see what is the ultimate size of this. So we're not in a hurry to throw out a number on a partially drilled off deposit when we have confidence that it's going to be bigger. So the timeline for the first MRE, I would suspect, is sometime later in 2026, certainly after this winter drill program.
Yeah, we've been basically saying people either like late 26 or H1 of 27. The whole idea is we put out all our drill collars, all our azimuths, all the assays. So we're being as completely transparent as we can for any independent scientists to use Leapfrog or whatever modeling software they like to model up the deposit based on the data that we've got, so they can put together their own analysis. What we are doing to add some clarity to that is we are doing the metallurgy. We announced that 6 weeks ago or so, and it is really important, I think, to next step to de-risking this area is to get the metallurgy defined as much as we can, and that we can. Sorry, I'm in a hotel, just getting broken into. No. So yeah, we'll get this metallurgy done, and we expect to get that. SGS is in the midst of doing that now. We expect to have that in January. And that'll further help to set up the model in a more robust way.
Oh, apologies. I was on mute. With the field work and geophysics done over the summer, is there anything missing to uncover the next zone, or do you have all the pieces to find the next?
That's an interesting question. I would hesitate to say we have all the pieces, but I believe that we have enough information now that we can effectively target the district scale that we're looking at right now. And that includes geochem, geophysics, surface mapping, structural and lithological with sampling. So those informations are all in place. But on a project of this size, and given the multitude of targets that we've generated, the harder job is, where do you go first? And we're only just now, as I said earlier, putting together that matrix to say, how do we prioritize this? And we know we're looking for at least two deposit types, a nickel end member and the high value copper mobilized member. And those are different exploration strategies. But the information is there. It's going to take some time to collate all that information and use it effectively.
Gentlemen, thank you for the update. I'm going to leave you with one last question, which opens up the opportunity for any closing remarks. But what specific milestones should investors expect over the next 3 to 12 months that could materially affect the valuation of Power Metallic?
Generally, when I'm on the road, I'm actually in Dallas today, and we're out doing sort of some, I would call non-deal roadshows throughout the U.S. When I'm talking to investors, I say, look, mining companies like Power Metallic, their valuation should rise with the value in the ground, the in situ value. So that's going to increase in generally two ways. One, you're going to drill holes and produce assays that demonstrate that the mineralized area has grown and the tonnage, the in situ tonnage has grown. Okay, so that's step one, which we're doing right now and have great potential to add to in a really big way. So that's step one. Step two is the commodity price grows. So when we did financing back in February, if the commodity prices at the time were X, they're up over 30% since then. That's in fact that the commodity prices for our particular basket of commodities, if you look at 45% copper, 55% precious metals, that basket's up by over 30% since last February. Yet the stock is basically flat to down a little bit, even though we've added 600% more land. We're now well advanced in the drill program. You can see, based upon some of the exploration plays we're now drilling, like Tiger Deep, the 64 extension, the fold hinge on the Hydrolands. Like, we're really into our AAA prospects. Again, we have to drill them and they have to be successful for it to really create value. But that's ultimately what drives value, is increasing the in situ value of the metal. And then the other thing that ultimately, I think, as a catalyst that will create value is de-risking. De-risking comes from the metallurgy. As we get the full metallurgical report out, and right now we're using 80% recoveries. We think that there's probably some upside to that number with the MET study. And I know some investors are carrying lesser recoveries because of some challenges they've had with lower grade polymetallic deposits around the world. So that'll be a big move for us, is getting that out there. And then I think the third catalyst, it will be moving to better exchanges. We're on the TSXV in Canada now, and the OTC BB in the US. And we've told folks that we have applied to the New York Stock Exchange, and we expect that to come through in the probably after Thanksgiving. And that'll be a big move for us, because we think it's funny. You're seeing the presidents talking about making critical mineral deals all over the world. When's the last time that was a priority for any president? Again, not in my lifetime. So mining has become front of the page news, and for good reason, because we spent so little time and effort on it that the supply base has dwindled across almost all commodities, and it's a supply demand business. Once that demand gets more than supply, the price elasticity goes up. So we're seeing that with the sudden rise in commodity prices, and I think this is just the beginning. Gold's pulled back and silver's pulled back a little bit here right now, but again, I think this is just a normal pausing in an overall bull market, and we'll see a resurgence of that at some point. And copper has yet to really rip its face off, but I think it will. There's a lot of macro events in copper that are going to really drive it. The supply shocks have been basically the negative side, between Panama, between Indonesia with the Freeport-McMoRan, and even in Kamoa-Kakula. There's not been a lot of positive supply news. There's been mostly negative. And we know it's difficult to bring these things in production, yet the demand for copper is going crazy, primarily driven by electrification and AI. And I think the people think that, hey, there may be a recession, and the whole doctor economy thing, that's what's kept copper from running. But I think this time it's going to be different, because even if there is a recession, I think copper prices are still going to rise because of the driving demand of AI. I was at an event last weekend listening to some speakers, and they were talking about there's going to be, just from I think the big five of the major media companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon, Tesla, etc., they're spending something like $400 billion a year each over the next 4 years building data centers. Okay, those things are going to use so much copper, you cannot believe it. So there's going to be an anomalous copper demand driven even beyond recessions that will power copper pricing. So that would be the other thing I'd be watching for. So I would say more assays, the metallurgical study, the commodity prices themselves, and then other minor things that will be helpful for us, because obviously the NISC is our 99% of what we are, but we will be listing our Chilean Metals subsidiary in November, and we've made some serious progress in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with our land package down there. So there's a lot of news coming, and then of course the listing in New York. So should be happy days for our shareholders. And I remind people that our stock sometimes seems to cycle. Like we did our financing 2 years ago at 66 cents, got $1.25 in thanks to the friendly economic packages that are available in Quebec. Stock went down to 50 cents, and it ripped all the way back to almost $2. Came back, we did the financing at $1.45. Stock went down to $1, and now you can see it's coming back this fall. It's been around $1.45. It's now I think it's around $1.25, $1.30. In my mind, it's caging up. The rubber band's getting very tight, and we're going to spring forward. That being said, I'm obviously a very large shareholder, and I'm talking my own book. But I believe it's a phenomenal time to be investing in mining generally, and in power metallic specifically. That's probably a good way to leave it, Kyle.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the update, and congratulations on the news. Till next time.
Cheers.
Thank you.